Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And first of all, I need to extend a big thank you to Professor Jayantha Devasiri for this invitation. And I'm pleased to be with you here today and to share some points about academic writing, referencing, and avoiding plagiarism. I'm also thankful to the Dean of the Faculty and the Department of Accountancy and Finance for organizing this kind of a session and also for the invitation. So the topic that we are talking about today, academic writing, referencing, and avoiding plagiarism, is a very important area irrespective of your domain, irrespective of the research methodology you adopt it across all research domains, areas, and topics, methodologies, theoretical perspectives. This is of utmost importance. Therefore, we will first look at the outline for the session. Given its relevance, we will first talk about why academic writing is important. Then I will move on to some specific aspects of academic writing. One is about using transition words and linking words. Then I'll talk about paraphrasing versus direct quoting. Another focus of today's session will be about plagiarism and how to avoid it, as well as I will give a brief overview and a brief introduction to the different referencing style that you could use for your research based on the guidelines of the university or the particular journal articles that you would be submitting your work. First of all, why you are having this kind of a session, why the department and the faculty organize this kind of a session is because as presumably undergraduate students or postgraduate students, whatever the case may be, you are engaging in an academic piece of work. So academic writing is particularly important when you want to communicate your research to a scholarly audience. So you're communicating your research maybe if you think of from a particular thought program like an undergraduate or a master's program, and if you think of a final output that as a research student you may be required to submit, which is a dissertation or a thesis. So that is an academic piece of work, and then you will be communicating to a scholarly audience. So what's this scholarly audience? Scholarly audience in the case of a dissertation or thesis would be your supervisor initially, and thereafter, of course, your thesis examiners. And if you are submitting to a journal, it will be the journal editors and the reviewers. Why we spend time, effort, and have sessions on academic writing is when you're presenting an academic piece of work like a thesis, it's essential that you set the correct tone, use the suitable language, and present your ideas very clearly and concisely. Sometimes you may have a brilliant research idea. Maybe you've done a lot of hard work depending on the duration of the program. It can be a shorter time if it's undergraduate program, but if it's a postgraduate, it can be a much longer time. So you may have spent a lot of time and effort, and you have a brilliant research idea. You've got very convincing findings, all that. But if you have not really communicated that effectively, the results or the value of your research will get diluted. So that, as the saying goes, quality of your research will in part depend on the quality of your academic writing. So having said that, always remember each word, each sentence, each paragraph, and each chapter that you include in your thesis or the different sections that you include in your research paper would need to be very carefully written. So there has to be a need for that every word, sentence, paragraph or chapter, because we often find students are very concerned about the word limit. When it's a dissertation or a thesis, typically there would be a word limit given based on the level, undergraduate, master's, doctoral, etc. So based on the particular guidelines of the program, the word limit will be specified, and the students often get carried away. Okay, I have to fit this word limit. How do I make sure that my thesis has this word limit? So their prime focus becomes meeting the word limit. Of course, it's important that you follow the guidelines and ensure that your research is really in line with the guidelines, which includes, of course, the specified word limit or the range. But more importantly, from an examination point of view, examiners, while will look at whether you have followed the guidelines, they will be looking at what you've written. So it's not only the word limit that's important, so what has really gone into that word limit. So you need to be very cautious about that. So you may have realized I'm using the words thesis and dissertation to an extent synonymously, because it depends different programs and at different levels these words are being used. Typically in the Sri Lankan context, for undergraduate research we call it dissertation, and for master's and doctoral research we typically call as thesis. But in different parts of the world, these two words can be used interchangeably or to mean the or the other way around as well. So what's important for you to really remember is, whatever you call it, let it be dissertation or thesis, it is an academic piece of work. So when it's an academic piece of work, as you all know, it will be very complex. So you will be dealing with complex arguments. You will be dealing with complex content. There will be various literature perspectives, theories. So it can be quite a difficult in terms of the complexity and the argument. But that is no excuse to make your writing also complex. So the talent or good academic writing is where you are despite of the complexities of your research, you are simple, direct and straightforward. So this is easier said than done, but you need to really remember, in your research, whatever you present has to be very simply presented, direct and straightforward. So sometimes you may think using high flown English words, very complicated words, uh, will be better academic writing. Not necessarily. If you can present something very simply and directly, well, that is good academic writing. So why academic writing is so important is it will assist the reader. So who is the reader? Initially your research supervisors, thereafter your research examiners, the thesis examiners, and thereafter if you are submitting to a journal, the journal editors, the reviewers, as well as once a journal article is published, research is global, so the readership in general, they all have to find that your study is easily understandable and your findings are convincing. So that is a important point you should remember when it comes to academic writing. So there are a few do's and don'ts which I like to talk about in terms of academic writing. One is formal tone. So when we talk in a more general sense, even now as I'm presenting, the wording I use sometimes can be a bit colloquial, the wording can be a bit informal, etc. That can be the case when we are just talking like this. And also sometimes in certain documents, you may be able to adopt a less informal tone as well. But in academic writing, formal tone is essential, because your dissertation or thesis is a formal document. It's an academic piece of document which requires formal tone. Then, as I earlier said also, the writing has to be clear, concise, well structured and organized. So these words, of course, we have heard them and you know about it, but you need to really take it very serious, because these words mean a lot in an academic piece of work. It has to be, despite of the complexity, the argument that you are posing has to be very clear, mentioned very upfront, and your argument has to be well structured with suitable subheadings uh, and heading subheadings when organizing with a logical flow. So these are key aspects of academic writing. And also, academic writing would have a particular disciplinary or a domain focus. As I understand, this is organized by Department of Accountancy and Finance. Therefore, your broader disciplinary focus would be accounting and finance. So, the particular research that you engage will be within the broader uh, accountancy and finance, but within that, you may be able to think of sub areas like something relating to financial accounting, management accounting, financial reporting, sustainability reporting, corporate governance, um, taxation, intellectual capital, behavioral finance. Like that, there can be so many other sub areas, but there should be a clear disciplinary focus because it is with that body of knowledge that you will be engaging in. So, disciplinary focus has to be there because you are contributing to a particular domain through your research to a particular knowledge base. Therefore, that should be clear through your writing as well. Then, of course, some may not take it much seriously, but although it may sound simple, sound minor, uh, it does have a big meaning when it comes to grammar and punctuation. Because when we talk about clarity in academic writing, part of the clarity can be achieved through proper usage of grammar. Because if your grammar is wrong, that will lead to difficulty for per reader to understand, and also that will reduce the clarity of your thesis. Punctuations, very important to use correct punctuation at the correct place. So sometimes you placing a comma at a particular place rather than another may convey a different meaning. So don't think they are just minor things. May appear minor, but still for all, when you look at the overall quality of your thesis, it does have big implications. Then about uniformity in style and consistent use of spelling, which I'll talk about in little more detail later on through another slide. Then adherence to writing guides. So there may be specific guidelines that have been stipulated by your degree program. Based on the bylaws or some specific guidelines for thesis writing, they may specify what are the particular referencing styles to use, what are the formatting requirements. So you need to stick to any writing guides as per the degree program or as the particular journal to which you are making a submission. Then, as we will talk later also, academic writing and referencing do go hand in hand. Good academic writing also involves the correct and consistent use of in-text citations and references. So that point also we can talk about it more in detail later because referencing is something we are going to separately touch upon during today's session. Okay. Then few more things about academic writing. Some other things you need to remember is you need to provide evidence where necessary. Now, in research, I think something I often say is research is different from opinion making. When it's an opinion, we can just think and tell something. Sometimes we may look at the sky and say, okay, it will rain in the evening, no? So then, see, you're with another friend, you will say, oh, it will rain in the evening. And the other person will say, no, it will not rain. So that becomes just your conversation. So whether it rains or not in the evening, you or your friend is not going to hold the other person responsible. It was just a conversation. So it's just an opinion that you held at that particular point. But do remember, research is not that. Research is different from opinion making. One distinguishing feature of research is we rationalize what we do in research. So in the process of rationalizing, we use evidence. Therefore, good academic writing involves providing evidence where necessary. And linked to that point is bringing in precise information to support your claims. Evidence or precise information is so critical. So evidence can come sometimes from literature, or evidence can sometimes come from various magazines or some practitioner perspectives, or else evidence can also come from your field data. So whatever the case, for whatever the claims that you make, there has to be solid evidence. And bring in precise information. So you cannot be vague in research. Maybe I think about, you can't say I did about 20 interviews. You can't say that. Once you finish your research, you would exactly know whether you did 19 interviews or 21 interviews. Maybe at the research proposal stage, based on what you plan to do, you may say, I will, at that point, you may give such a kind of approximation, but your actual research, you have to be very precise. Survey response also same. So, good academic writing involves being very precise about what you've done, what you've found. Then about linking words. So, given that we are going to talk about it in more detail later, I will not go deep into it, but linking words, where you are using words to connect ideas, how you use, under what circumstances, and what kind of linking words, we'll talk about it in more detail little later. Then the other thing, a good academic writing would also involve writing short and focused paragraphs. So sometimes we've seen when we read students' work, some are very lengthy. So the paragraph is running to almost a page. So then you get lost. The reader gets lost halfway. Okay, what was this paragraph about? And then moment the paragraph becomes too long, obviously as the researcher, the student is faced with the problem about connecting the beginning and the end. So there is disconnection between the beginning of the paragraph and the end. So if your paragraphs become too lengthy, it is difficult to keep focused. But also you shouldn't make it too short that it is kind of a one sentence paragraph. So it's a middle part that you need to strike. Refer supporting documents and appendices, which are appendices are typically supporting documents, which we'll talk about it later as well, to the main body of the research. Now, when it comes, good academic writing really helps the reader to follow your study. So, through good signposting, clear writing, you're actually guiding the reader to follow your research. So, in that sense, if there are supporting documents, you need to also refer it to the body of the text. Pay attention to detail throughout the writing process. I mean, we as academics, our eyes have been trained to, spot these little kind of inconsistency. So your supervisors, so don't get annoyed when your supervisors pick on you. Okay, font size is different here, where you have missed a comma, or the capital symbol is not consistent. So, academics have been trained to spot these things, and the extent to which you pay attention to detail will also reflect to what extent you have been cautious and really attentive during the research process. So if you are negligent, you may find more such inconsistencies in your writing, and examiners are bound to pick. Okay. So those are some of the do's that I want to specifically talk about when it comes to good academic writing. Along with those do's, there are some points or don'ts that we need to also bear in mind. I'm sure you've heard your supervisors, your course lecturers would have told these to you, but presumably hearing it again might help you to reinforce those ideas. One thing you need to minimize, I'm not saying avoid, minimize is repetitions. So you may think, okay, my thesis is a long document, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, or whatever the case may be, depending on the degree program and as specified in the program, there would be a particular word limit. And so it's a large document and your thesis will involve several chapters. Obviously, you may feel, of course, what I told in the introduction, I would need to refer it in the literature review, maybe bring those ideas to my methodology in justifying my methodological choice, and also connect it to my findings. And when I'm presenting my conclusions, I'll need to refer to it, and also I would need to talk about it when I'm presenting the contributions as well. So obviously you will think there's no way that I can't kind of wait without repeating. So that's totally true. There would be an element of repetition or reinforcement of similar points, ideas throughout the research, and that's needed. That good signposting also would involve reminding the reader, um, the aim of this chapter is this, whatever, and then you may have a chapter summary to summarize what you've done and say, continuing from this, in the next chapter I will do that. So in that way, good signposting will invariably involve some repetitions. Then what do I say by don't have repetitions? What I mean here is don't repeat paragraphs and paragraphs in multiple places. Because we see sometimes students, they write a paragraph in the introduction, which is backed by literature. And when it comes to the literature review chapter, they again copy and paste that same paragraph in the literature review. And when they are maybe in the discussion also, they want to refer that particular literature source. So they copy that same paragraph to the discussion also. So the danger is your examiners as academics, they have, they are used to reading things consistently. Give me a message. A minute, please. So they are used to reading a document on a continuous basis. And if they have read something earlier, they will obviously remember, well, I saw this earlier also. So didn't I read this earlier? So then the examiner will see, okay, where did I read? Okay, this is coming in the literature review. I read this earlier in the introduction also. So that doesn't convey a good message about your research. So while you can repeat your idea, you need to reword and maybe elaborate in one place and maybe just remind the idea in another word. So similar ideas can be reinforced in multiple places, but you cannot copy and paste paragraph to paragraph in multiple places. I hope you got that point clear. Then contractions. Rather than saying cannot, in academic writing, in academic writing, you should say cannot, not can't. So you should avoid contractions in academic writing. Complicated sentences. So you may have experienced sometimes reading complicated sentences. Sentences become complicated. One instance where they become complicated is when it's too long. When the sentence is too long, it's again difficult to maintain the connection between the beginning and end, and it becomes difficult for the reader to understand, and there is lack of clarity. So one way you can reduce the chances of having complicated sentences is try to break up the sentence if you find your sentence is too long. Then redundant or wordy phrases. Now, if you think about essays, or if you think about creative writing, some of the writing that you've done in your school days, you may recall. School days, etc., you may realize that there are instances that to really explain or to kind of make the writing more interesting, you have used so many adjectives. Flowery language, you say, and you say excellent, beautiful, magnificent. So sometimes you're using several words to kind of convey that idea. So in creative writing, that may be accepted, that may be possible. But in academic writing, we started off saying be clear and upfront. So clarity is key. To ensure clarity, you have to always read and see, is this word really necessary? So if you leave your drafts aside and revisit them after several days, you might be able to pick such redundant words and make your writing tighter. So writing tighter is very important when it comes to academic writing. That's about redundant words and wordiness. Vagueness. So as I earlier said, we cannot be vague in research. We have to be very specific. So vagueness is something we need to avoid. And then about technical terms and jargons. So there may be instances, depending on your research, you may have no choice but to bring in some technical terms. They are based on the particular study you're doing. There may be based on the industry, whatever the case may be, there may be some words that are unavoidable. So in such a situation, you need to maybe have a footnote, endnote or endnote based on the style of referencing and formatting you have adopted in the program. Give a brief kind of a introduction or explanation of the term. Otherwise, where possible, keep jargon, technical terms to the minimum and let the reader clearly follow through your study. Colloquial vocabulary, informal language, slang has to be also avoided at all times when it comes to academic writing. So the typical language that we talk may not necessarily be appropriate in every instance when it comes to academic writing. So you have to adopt a more formal tone. Okay. So these are some of the important things you need to remember in terms of what you should avoid or minimize. So then I'll come to some important aspect of academic writing, which is use of linking or transition words and phrases. So we started off saying in your research, you're dealing with complex arguments, difficult subject matter. Therefore, you need to bring clarity to your writing. So linking or transition words essentially help you to connect some ideas in your writing. So these words are also called as connecting words and they bring clarity to your writing. So sometimes we'll take some examples in the next slide. So when do we need these linking or transition words? Sometimes when we are moving from one point to another, maybe we are introducing a contrasting point to what we discussed so far, then you may want to bring in a linking word. Or you want to reinforce or you want to kind of highlight, emphasize a particular point, then you may want to use a linking word. Or sometimes to enhance clarity, you may want to give an example. That's another instance where linking words can be useful. Or especially in terms of a literature review, where there is a large body of literature, maybe with two schools of thought. So you first present one school of thought, A said this, in similar vein B said this, and agreeing to that C said this, and etc. etc. You show one school of thought. Then you try to bring a different viewpoint and you say in contrast, and you then bring in another school of thought, and then you show how there are two worldviews in relation to this particular phenomena. Or sometimes to show a sequence, maybe contribution. You say this study contributes firstly to literature, secondly to theory, and thirdly to practice. Or you say the thesis is structured in the following manner. First it presents this, second it presents this, third it presents this, finally it presents this. Or sometimes your data analysis, the methodology you followed for data analysis, like that, you may want to bring clarity through the particular linking words that you used, or to give reason of why something happened, or after a kind of a description to provide a sum up of that particular discussion, a conclusion, you may use a linking word. So with that you would realize, obviously, linking words bring clarity to your writing, but you should also remember that you should not overuse linking words. That was a particular, I had this small experience I could share when I was doing my PhD. We got the opportunity that we could show a small section of our writing to a particular writing expert in the faculty from the language unit, and then she went through and she commented on the writing. So I'm sharing for your own learning. Also, one comment I got was, she said, your writing is very clear, so it's very easy to understand. So when you're and it you can so you can actually omit some of your linking words. So even without these particular linking words, not all, she was saying that I have overused. So if you even remove some of the linking words, your writing still becomes clear, because we are saying we are bringing linking words to improve clarity. So sometimes if you have presented very clear and upfront, so you can reduce the use of linking words as well. So that's a learning which I obtained during my PhD days, and reflecting on that comment now also when I write, I'm thinking, okay, do I really need a linking word here? Is there opportunity for me to reduce? Because sometimes when you think you want to increase clarity, you may even tend to overuse linking words. So let's look at some examples. So these are different instances we could use linking or transition words. One is to show effect, consequence, or results. So regarding this, consequently, as a result, according to, therefore, so you are trying to give reason. Emphasis, so you give one point and you are trying to give more weightage to the next. Then you say moreover, more evident, additionally, in fact, besides, indeed. So those words, when the reader sees that, they think, okay, the next point is even more important. Then if you want to kind of present a particular point and give some examples, you will say, for instance, for example, etc. And then say, if you are discussing a body of literature, then you can say, A said this. Similarly, a study founded on another industry, whatever, B said this. Or likewise, A and B agree on this, whatever. So that way you can connect similar points. The linking words can also be used to show disagreements or counterpoints. So sometimes if you have two ideas, two particular arguments, you may say on one hand and present it, and then the other argument you say on the other hand. So if you use on one hand, obviously it should be followed by another saying on the other hand. So there you are talking about two contrasting viewpoints. Also, to show disagreement or a different viewpoint, you can also say you present and you say nevertheless and give a different view. Or you say despite or although or however, all that convey a counterpoint or a disagreement. Then we talked about sequence, which I said sometimes showing the contribution of the study, or sometimes showing the data collection method or data analysis method. You may say first, second, third, final, etc. So that shows the order to which you went about doing something. So that brings a lot of clarity. So then moment you say first, second, third, then the reader can, clearly follow and see what are those different reasoning. Linking words can also be used to give reason, like with words like due to the fact, owing to the fact, since, because, etc. And finally, we expect you to have a chapter summary in your research, except in the introduction, where you will not have a chapter summary. You will only give a kind of a um, overview of the thesis when you end, and also in the final conclusion chapter, you can have a summary of the research at the beginning, but you end with limitations and directions for future research. So, but other chapters, typically literature review, methodology, theory, findings, etc., you will have a chapter summary which will kind of bring together the key points discussed. So, in there you might say to sum up, in brief, in essence, to conclude, etc. These words convey that you are bringing in a summary. Okay. So in the interest of time, we don't have, the opportunity to really go through articles in depth and then refer how these things have been practically applied. So what I would suggest is, given that all of you are doing research in the accounting and finance area, you know what are the good journals. You could refer the ABDC ranking list, identify some good journals in accounting and finance in your broad area of research, and then see how the different linking words have been used and for what purposes. Is it to add emphasis? Is it to give examples? Is it to bring a contrasting point, etc., etc.? You could see. So this is something you could leisurely do. That's kind of a takeaway point you can get from this session also, how linking words are actually used in in a journal article. Okay, moving on. I'd also like to emphasize this point about uniformity in style. In research, we say it's not mix and match, it's consistency. So there are instances where you need to mix and match, but academic writing doesn't believe in mix and match, it believes in consistency. So the style you adopt should be consistently applied throughout the dissertation or thesis. So there has to be a unified style adopted across the thesis. So what is the style? Now you need to think. If your university, institute, or the degree program has said, well, you have to follow this style for referencing, this is the formatting we expect, etc., etc., then you have to follow it because those are guidelines coming from the program. So such guidelines can be for referencing, which we will be talking about later. Then also there will be a decision whether you use footnotes versus endnotes. So based on the program, you will be informed whether to have footnotes where you have it at the end of the particular page or endnotes at the end of the document. Then formatting. What's the font size? What's the font type? Whether should it be bold or underlining, or do you hyphenating, etc. So sometimes there may not be rules. For instance, whether to hyphenate a particular word or not. Those things may not be necessarily specified. So you need to follow what's specified by the program. In the absence of such specific guidelines, you can develop your own style sheet. So you can decide, well, when it comes to this word, I'm going to hyphenate, or I'm not going to hyphenate. I'm going to include it as one word, or I'm going to include it as two words. So whatever the case may be, if there's no specific guideline, you can follow what you prefer but consistency is key. You can't say field work as 2 words in one place, 1 word in another place, and field hyphen work in another place. So while there may not be a rule per se, whatever you adopt, you need to be consistent. So consistency is something we truly expect in academic writing, and examiners will spot if you have been inconsistent. Okay. So when it comes to consistency, one is about formatting, referencing, and also importantly about the spellings. So each of us may have our own preference, UK versus US. So if by the degree program, if they specify you have to use UK English, or if they say you have to use US English, well, you have no choice but to follow. But in the absence of such specific guidelines, you can adopt whatever, but you have to again be consistent. So that's what I have given some examples. Flavor versus flavor, labor versus labor, organization versus organization. So it's a matter of consistency based on what you are more comfortable with. Whether to hyphenate or not, capital and simple letters in headings, subheadings. So if you just kind of follow through the slides that I have presented, you may realize the first word, first letter is capital. Thereafter, can you see what thereafter you may realize that I am having simple words for the first words thereafter, isn't it? Can you see? So that's my style. So it doesn't mean to say that, everyone has to do it that way. I have seen some people, when it comes to uniform style, some may write U capital and S capital. Well, that's okay if that's what you prefer. But if you do that, then throughout that has to be the way. Now, in my case, throughout, I'm only making the first letter of the first word capital, rest of it as simple. Font types, again, if the degree program specifies a particular one, you need to follow. If not, you can decide the font that you want. But typically in academic writing, the thesis, we tend to use Times New Roman more often. What's the font size also? Typically it may be specified. Spacing margin is also usually mentioned in the particular program. Moving on, another important thing I like to talk about is paragraph construction. So we started off saying each word, each sentence, each paragraph, and each chapter that you write in your thesis has to be carefully constructed, and each of that has to have a meaning and should add value to the overall study. So in that sense, you need to reflect on how you really construct your paragraphs. As we earlier mentioned, you need to keep your paragraph short and focused. Typically, one paragraph should carry one idea. So within a paragraph, you would have multiple sentences. So there should be a good transition, linkage between the sentences of a paragraph. And there may be several paragraphs within a single section. So there has to be a sequential flow between the paragraphs, how each paragraph gradually builds upon a particular point, and you need to minimize one sentence paragraph. So it's not recommended to have one sentence paragraphs, and very often we say don't make your paragraphs very short or very long. So it's striking a balance. Another point I like to talk about is appropriate tense. So you may be sometimes thinking, am I to use past tense for this research? Am I to use present tense? Am I to use future tense? So while there is no rule across everything which tends to use, what tends to use would really depend on what you are writing. That is, when you say what you're writing, is it the research proposal or the dissertation? And also what components of it. So typically, when it comes to research proposal, as you all know, Research proposal is your intention, your intended study, something you hope to do. So it is something you haven't done yet, but you're hoping or proposing to do. So understandably, the proposed study objectives, the proposed methodology in a research proposal needs to be uh, written in the future tense. Then when it comes to data collection in a thesis, that means you've done your research, you have completed your thesis, and then now you are in your methodology, you're mentioning about how you collected data. So your research is over. So if in that situation, after you have done the research, you are presenting about something that has already been done, how you collected data, from whom, how many, what are the methods you adopted. So then in such a situation, which is about your reporting about something that's already done, you present in past tense. Then in a thesis, your study objectives, you will be presenting in the present tense. The current study, what it does, you present in the present tense. So these are some examples. So that's why you have to play it by the ear. Based on what you're writing, you need to decide what's the appropriate tense to use. Okay. Then also there is this argument about which personal pronouns to use. So while it to an extent depends on research methodology, it also depends on the individual's writing style. So we often say in research, we may not specify rules. They are very much best practices or some suggestions or some guidelines. So in particularly as students in accounting and finance, it's good that you refereed rank journals in accounting finance domain and see what kind of style they adopt, and that may help you to justify your own decisions as well. So when it comes to personal pronouns, traditionally in quantitative or positivistic studies, typically the word the researcher was commonly used, because in a quantitative positivistic study, we assume that the researcher is distant and independent of the study. So to show that independence, distance, objectivity, you tend to use the researcher. That was the traditional way, but more often now, even in quantitative positivistic research, we see the word I and we being used even in this particular tradition. Quite in contrast, in qualitative research, the very nature of the research is about subjective multiple realities, and within that process, we say that the research is also part and parcel of the research process. Therefore, using I in your dissertation or using we, if it's a joint publication with you and your supervisor, it is common to use. So despite the difference in methodology, quantitative or qualitative, you can use this research, this study, etc. Okay. Then a bit about using tables. So in research, there may be many instances that you may decide to use tables and figures. So as the saying goes, one picture is worth 1,000 words. So using tables and figures can be very useful if effectively done. So you need to make a very conscious decision. Am I to use a table or a figure? If so, what? Why? What am I going to include? And how am I going to really use that table or figure to support my writing? Those are important considerations. So typically when it comes to a table, we use tables to present numerical data, statistics, or sometimes if you have lot of findings, you may, or say you're doing a comparative analysis. So you might want to give a snapshot view about the comparisons through a table. Or your theory. Sometimes there may be several theoretical notions that you're talking about. So you may decide to have some tables to give clarity to the reader about the meaning of each of those terms. So like that, tables can be very useful to summarize concepts or to present a large volume of data, numbers, etc., and also presenting findings. So typically in quantitative research, because by nature they are dealing with lot of numbers, tables are often used to present large chunks of data. So sometimes in a quantitative study, you may have multiple tables with numbers, with a lot of numerics, presenting various aspects of your findings. So there can be multiple tables, but the content has to be connected to the study also. So you say as shown in table 2, see table 3 for details. So you need to you have to connect the content and the table. So not only in quantitative research, in qualitative research also tables are used. So while in quantitative research, it's mainly to present your quantitative findings. Qualitative research, as I mentioned, say if you are having multiple cases, sometimes you can use a table to show the contextual information about your multiple cases in the research context chapter. Similarly, you may want to use a table to present your mini case study findings across the different cases. So through the table, you may be showing the similarities and differences. Or sometimes, again, as I earlier told, theoretical terms can be used. Then also you may use tables to show about interviewee details, maybe the designations or areas of the functional areas of interviewees, the duration of interviewees, each interview, number of experience in the company. So if it's a case study, and if you are trying to look at evolution of a practice, you may primarily get people who have been serving in the company for a long time. So to justify your selection of interviewees in a table, you might want to show the years of experience. So while there is no hard and fast rule, what tables to include and what to include would largely depend on your study. So very much it will help you to structure your writing. So because referring to the table, you may be able to reduce some of the write-up and you can cross-refer to the table, and that can bring higher clarity or to the research and help the reader to follow your research in a more easy manner. Okay. So like with tables, there may be instances in your research that you want to have figures also. So again, depending on the study, what figure to include will be different. Typically in a quantitative research, as a means to present your findings, you may be wanting to include various figures. So they can be in the form of various charts, pie charts, bar charts, frequency histograms, scatter diagrams, there can be various. And also sometimes in a qualitative research, maybe the theoretical model you may want to show through a figure, or your conceptual framework in a quantitative research you can show through a figure. Summary findings you can show through a figure. So in that sense, figures can be very useful bring a lot of clarity, because at a glance the reader can see, and that they will be helpful for the reader to understand the write-up. So whatever the case may be, when you're using tables and figures, there are some points that you need to bear in mind. One is about suitable headings. So if you're having tables, figures, they have to have appropriate heading. Table 3.2, interviewee details. Figure 4.1, theoretical framework. So like that, you need to have a very clear title that accurately reflects the content. And whatever the table or figure has to be cross-referred to the body of the dissertation or thesis. So you say as shown in figure 3.2 and you connect that figure to the write-up. Or you give an explanation and say also see figure 4.6. So that way you bring clarity. But you need to also make sure not to overuse tables and figures. Because if you are overusing, sometimes that may be a way that you are trying to reduce your writing, but that's not something that is acceptable. So to get the maximum, you need to decide what table and figure and try to bring in the most appropriate information in it. Give me a minute, please. Yeah, sorry about that. So you need to really make sure that you don't overuse tables and figures because that can distract the reader, and also that may be interpreted as poor academic writing also, that you're simply using tables rather than explaining through your writing. And as you would understand, in a dissertation or a thesis, we need to give, as part of the preliminary pages, we need to give a list of tables and figures. You give the number and you give the particular title of the table or figure as well as the page. So you need to have two separate documents or two separate lists, as list of tables and list of figures under preliminary pages. Again, that will be a useful addition in the thesis for your examiners, because at a glance they see what are the tables, what are the figures, and what page they can refer them. So if they want to go back to them, refer multiple times, that becomes much more easy. So in a thesis or dissertation, we need to always see from the examiners to kind of help the examiner to easily follow through the research. And another thing is, when it comes to tables and figures, it should be clearly legible and numbered based on the chapter. So clearly legible, sometimes if you have too much content, if it is so crowded, maybe the fonts or the particular diagram, etc., is too small to be clearly seen, then the value of the figure or table is lost. So in such an instance, you need to really decide what is the essential content that I should include in the table and figure, and how I can use that table or figure as a basis to explain my writing. And when you say numbered based on the chapter, so the numbering would be, if the first figure in chapter 3 will be figure 3.1. So the second figure in chapter 3 will be figure 3.2. Then when it's come to chapter 5, first table will be table 5.1, 5.2, etc. So you have a sequential number, but of course following the particular chapter number. Then the other thing is about formatting. So how you format a table or figure would be based on the particular style that you've adopted. Of course, if it comes to APA, etc., they specify how the table or the figure table has to be formatted. in some degree programs, referencing style may be used only for the AP, etc., only for the referencing per se, but not for formatting of the tables, etc. In such a situation, you can adopt your own style for formatting tables, the labeling, where the title comes, whether you have horizontal lines, vertical lines, all that. So that could be differed based on the institutional specification, whether you can adopt your style consistently or whether you have to follow a specific style as stipulated by the program. Okay. Connected to tables, figures would also be appendices. So what are appendices? So they are in essence supplementary or additional or supporting documents that you will include in your research. So what are those supplementary additional documents? So again, while there is no hard and fast rule, what you include as appendices would really depend on your study. How would you really decide, am I to include a particular document as a figure or a table or an appendix? So that's a decision that you as the researcher has to make. So if we include something as a table or a figure, that is an integral part of the document. So it is part and parcel of the body of the research because the figure or table is embedded to the body of the research. But appendices are not essential parts. Instead they usually form as additional evidence to something that's been said or done in the research. So appendices help to understand what you have done, what you have found better. Therefore, typically appendices are included after references so that there is no disturbance to the flow of the main text. So right at the end. And also some instances, certain integral documents or parts to your research also you may decide to have an appendix if the document is very lengthy. Then you may think it's very lengthy, so having this within the body of the text is kind of disturbing the flow. So for instance, if there is a very important document which is relevant to your research, which is running to about 2 or 3 pages, then you may want to refer it within the body of the text, tell a bit about it within the body of the text and say see appendix A for details. So then to get more insights, more detail about it, the reader can go to the appendix. So the key idea is you want to facilitate the reader to understand your study better and not kind of disturb the flow. So within this background, what can be included as appendices really differ based on the study. So as I said, there are no hard and fast rules, but typically research instruments, questionnaires in a quantitative study, interview guides in a qualitative study, they are very much included as appendices. While you talk about it, explain it within the methodology and say refer appendix C for details like that. Then certain other relevant additional materials. So as I said, these are very much supplementary information. So they are additional or detail. So they are helping to give better sense to your study. So things like sample interview transcripts, because obviously you're not expected to give all your interview transcripts in the case of a qualitative study. But just for the reader to comprehend how you have done and what the what's the nature of your transcripts, you may want to give a small extract of a or a sample of a interview. So sample interview transcript or an extract can be an appendix. Then sample coding schemes. So how coding was done, your thematic map, etc. can be used as an appendix. Summary organizational documents, again, it depends on the study. Very often in research, while you will not be getting access to confidential data, maybe typically in accounting and finance research, the financial numbers, etc. But you may want to show some organizational documents, maybe budgetary control reports, performance measurement reports, balance scorecard reports, your maybe quality indicators, KPIs, not the figures per se, but the particular uh, formats, documents that are available in the company which you reviewed, etc. You may include them as additional documents, the format basically. And it's very important to remember, in the case of a quantitative research, output tables are not usually included as appendices. So again, an important takeaway is you need to refer clearly all appendices to the body of text and connect the appendix to the main text. Each table, figure or appendix cannot stand in isolation. So there has to be a connection of each of the table, figure or appendix to the main body. So that's very important, how you bring that connection. So if you don't have a way of connecting, that means that's not necessary for the study. Okay. So maybe this is another point that you can really think about, and I can even take some few minutes to show one or two articles how various tables, figures and appendices have been used. So I'll take just two examples. Of course, while you can certainly refer based on the particular journal articles that you read in your discipline, your particular domain. I'll just take two examples and try to explain this a little bit more. So this is an article based on my PhD study. So it's a qualitative research article based on a experience of the balance scorecard. So now I'm trying to show where tables, figures and appendices have been used. So this is a study about the fate of the balance scorecard with the theoretical lens of actor network theory and using qualitative case study approach. So we'll just scroll down to see what kind of tables, figures are there in this research. So this is one table. So profile of interviewees. Now if you look at this table at a glance, it gives an overview of what are the different levels of management who were interviewed, from corporate management level, functional, regional, branches, etc., various people. And then this study's data collection was across a pilot study, main study, and a follow-up. So different phases. How many interviews were done? 9 interviews at the pilot study stage, spending 10 hours. So why do you have the duration? Because in a qualitative study, we strive to show depth. So how much of time was spent? So that shows 10 hours. Then main study, 19 interviews, 28.5 hours. Follow-up study, 3 interviews, 2.5 hours, and total interviews are 31, interviews 41 hours. So this helps to give a snapshot view about the data collected via interviews. So that's one table, of course, which should be also cross-referred to the text. So it says here, if you look at, see, series of open-ended interviews were carried out with personnel representing different levels of the management hierarchy at various locations, head office, regional office and branches, and diverse functional areas such as accounting, finance, strategic planning, marketing, HR, operations. For details, see table 1. So you're connecting the table. And here also we see appendix 1. So that appendix 1 is talking about the broader interview questions. See, so here you have appendix 1 with broader interview questions. So as you go down, you see another table with the balance scorecard perspectives and KPIs with the different 4 perspectives of the balance scorecard and the different KPIs or measures at the branch and the corporate level. So then, given that it's a qualitative research, it's very much in narrative form. And so this is appendix 1 about interview questions. And there's another appendix 2 about key archival records reviewed. So when you, in the methodology, you say archival records were reviewed, then what were the reviews? Documents reviewed, you get clarity through this. So that's a qualitative article. And so let me share now another one. So this is a quantitative article. So this is about, does leadership matter, leadership styles, family supportive supervisor behavior and work interference with family conflict. So you can see what kind of table. So this is a quantitative study which is into work. Give me a minute. So it says, based on transformational leadership and social support theories, we examine the direct effect of transformational and transactional leadership on work interferences with family conflict and family supportive supervisor behavior as mediators. So this is a quantitative study. So you can see what kind of tables, figures, appendices, if any, are there in this study. So here we have under the methodology, there is a conceptual model. Typically, in a quantitative research, conceptual model or conceptual framework has to be presented through a figure. Then you have these tables which are giving the statistical data. mean, standard deviations, correlations, reliability. So there's table 1. Then there's another table 2, which is giving comparisons of the measurement models. Then you have another table about the results of the hypothesis and about mediations. Then again more findings related, and also there's a figure with the output. So you can see now when we compare, now you can see the tables and figures are very much methodology dependent. We are in a compared to a quantitative study, the kind of tables, figures you see in a qualitative would be very much different. So that's why I said within your research area, it's a good idea for you to refer rank journals and understand what kind of figures, tables are being used. So this is what we were trying to say. So you can take time later on, leisurely, try to refer several journal articles in your broad area of research and see the kind of tables, figures, appendices, and that will help you to also use tables, figures, and appendices effectively in your research. Right. With that, we move on to another area which is important in terms of academic writing. It's about paraphrasing versus direct quoting. So typically we say your research has to show your writing style. It should carry your flavor. So as much as possible, you need to express your ideas in your own words. Therefore, paraphrasing is very much kind of encouraged. So with paraphrasing, what we do is we get the idea from the source, then express that idea in our own words and give the citation. So that is very much a recommended course of action in a research study. But of course, having said that, there are instances direct quoting will be more appropriate. So direct quoting is suitable when you want to highlight an author's definition of important terms. So if it's a widely well accepted definition, if you try to paraphrase, you might actually distort the meaning because it's well expressed and it is highly regarded in your discipline. So you trying to meddle with the words and rewording may not convey the real idea. And there means sometimes now in research we deal with very complex matters, complex arguments, subject matter. So sometimes the author would have expressed it so well, a particular viewpoint, you feel if you change the wording, you are going to distort. So author-specific view or well-expressed opinions, it's best that you don't paraphrase. Instead, use direct quotation. So when you're using direct quotations, you need to include the page number as well. So other than in these circumstances, such as definitions, well-expressed opinions, or very powerful ideas of authors where rewording will distort the meaning, in those instances, while we strongly advise you to go for direct quotations, other circumstances, paraphrasing is the more desired option. Okay. So here is an example of paraphrasing versus direct quoting. So paraphrasing, here you can see at the end, the author name and year is given. The heavy focus on manufacturing is consistent with management accounting practices, historical roots to manufacturing product costing and control of factory cost. So that is conveying that this idea is very much about the particular as expressed by the author, but it is being reworded. That is why it's coming as a paraphrase. Now look at this direct quote. It says as. Now both of these are taken from this is a particular publication from my PhD. So this is from my literature review paper based on my PhD study. So this Shield 1997 was a paraphrase term I used in my research in this article, and so in 1995 is a direct quote that I used in my research. So let me show why this direct quote was used. So you can see the title of the research is Management Control Research in the Banking Sector, a Critical Review and Directions for Future Research. So in that direct quote is as so in 1995, page 284 noted. So we earlier said if it's a direct quote, you need to include the page number. And you can see these 3 dots. What does it indicate? There is some content that you have omitted, because when we are using a direct quote, we may only use what's relevant for what we are trying to express. So this is just to indicate that while there is more to this, I have omitted that part. So 3 dots indicate that you have omitted some parts and then taking what is necessary. So banks are clearly facing considerable challenges, and there is and has been a need for an appropriate response. This response is manifested in part in the management control systems that are being introduced in the banks. So you can see now the studies, the article is on management control in banking, and this quote nicely captures that key essence, and that's why it is being mentioned as a direct quote. So you can see, given that this is expressed so well as appropriate for this particular study, it's included as a direct quote rather than being paraphrased. Yes, you have a question to ask? Or do you want to ask her then? Someone raised the hand. You want to ask the question now or at the end? Then another distinction in terms of academic writing is author prominent versus information prominent. So as the name suggests, author prominent, and we also call it as narrative citations. Information prominent, we also call it as parenthetical citations. So it is author prominent versus information prominent, or narrative versus parenthetical. So author prominent, as the name suggests, that means you start with the author. You're giving prominence to the author. So when you look at this first example, it's clear that X and Bojononek 2005 state that bundling of the balance scorecard with other techniques, fashion setters, such as consultancy firms, early adopters, and accounting academics have led to its diffusion in Sweden. So when we say X and Bojononek, you are giving prominence to the author. It's X and Bojononek 2005 who said this, not anyone else. So that's what we say author prominent or more narrative form. Information prominent means it's not to the person who told it. Instead, you are giving focus to the information. So now, for instance, it says here, firms may adopt balance scorecard due to different motives, such as to translate strategy into action, manage organizational change, implement quality programs, and win awards for excellence in quality due to managerial fads and fashions, and as a means to abandon traditional budgetary control. So you are giving a range of reasons or motives why organization may implement balance scorecard, and then After giving all the reasons you are giving, well, this is the citation. So there the focus is not the fact that Malmi 2001 said, it's instead the fact that firms adopt balanced scorecard due to different motives and to give an overview of the motive. So they in conveying that information, you say this was told by so and so. So you may realize the difference between author prominent and information prominent. So you might think now, why again in academic writing maintaining variety will really bring more kind of reduce the monotony of your write-up. So it's always good to have a mix of author prominent and information prominent as suited to what you are trying to say. So if you are trying to, convey a point, something that has been told by multiple studies, multiple researchers, then you give the points and then include all the citations of what is applicable. So it is then more information prominent. So you are giving the prominence to the information and saying A said this, B said this, C said this. So you are giving all the people. But if you want to, having said that, if you want to highlight a particular perspective of a different author, then you may then give a author prominent citation. So it's a mix that you may want to adopt, and it would also depend on what you are really trying to write. So again, a discussion point for you could be looking at articles. You can see, okay, in what instances are there author prominence, what instance there are information prominent, what are the different direct quotes used, what are the instances paraphrasing is being used. So this can be another discussion point that you could think about based on the various articles you read and your particular research area. Okay. So that also I will leave for the time being and move on. Now, while so far we were talking about good academic practice, how you can write well to improve clarity, convey what you intend to convey with in a direct and clear manner, etc. So we took a lot of time, about 1.5 hours, to really talk about academic writing. So within the next hour, we will be talking about citations, and also we'll take a little bit of time to also talk about referencing or citation management. So why we are taking less time for those is there are resources available and you can refer the resources and really do that on your own. But good academic writing is something that you need to develop on your own. So reading good journal articles, reading in various rank journals is really what can help you to improve your academic writing. So with that note, please take time to leisurely refer good articles, see how paraphrasing, direct quoting, information prominent and author prominent citations have been used. So we'll talk about importance of citations, because a key aspect we are talking about today is also about plagiarism. So one key reason of citing is to avoid plagiarism. So we'll take these points one by one. So why is citing important? So when you think about your research, I know if you relate your research to examination, you will, as students, we say students are driven by assessment. So if you relate your research to or your thesis to thesis evaluation, you will take it that much more serious. So finally, in your thesis, you want to make sure that your examiners are happy with the quality and the depth and the coverage of your research. So when they are examining your research, they may realize, while they would have expertise on your research methodology, theory, literature, etc., But do remember, you are an expert in your research because you have spent a lot of time and effort doing that research. Your examiner, while would have some general expertise, they may not necessarily know in and out of every study that you have cited. They would know, of course, but not necessarily everything. Therefore, if they find that you are citing a particular study multiple times, they may see, okay, A and B 2024. Okay, this is a new article and this person is citing several times. So then they may want to say, okay, I want to know where this has been published. Is it in a good journal? Who are the authors? What's the title? What's the journal? So those kind of questions can come to your examiner. So moment they see a particular citation recurring many times, they will go to your reference list and then see what is the citation and then try to understand the quality and credibility of the source. So, they will see whether it's from a good journal or etc. through looking at the citation. Sometimes uh, when they try to look at the citation and when they go to the reference list, if you have been negligent, maybe you have missed it out. So that conveys a very negative signal about your research. That shows to the examiner that you have been negligent. You have not paid attention to detail. We said in academic writing, paying attention to detail is key. But examiner will think, okay, now this person has this in the citation, but it's not there in the reference list. So examiner is not going to be happy. So that can create a negative impression about your research because they referred the reference to see what it is. Now they can't identify the source. So one important use of citing is identifying sources in the research for the reader. So that will be a useful point for the readers to find out about the sources you have cited. And also it gives credit to researchers and writers whose words or ideas you borrow. Because we cannot say, no one has done this research in this area, I am the first person to do, not really. We are always contributing to a particular body of knowledge. There is so much of work out there on a connected note. They may be dealing with some connected points to what you have done. So they are not necessarily have done what you have done. They have not researched what you are researching. But obviously there is a lot of connected body of literature out there. So you are showing how you draw on them and also you show how your study is different. So it is in a way giving credit and also showing how you build on their research in forming your own research perspective. So you're acknowledging others' researchers' role in shaping your research. So you show how you carry forward a particular dialogue, particular debate, how you contribute to a particular debate through drawing on and borrowing from others' research ideas. And as I earlier said, it allows others to follow up or retrieve the material. So if they are very interested, sometimes a reader is very interested in your research area. So he or she may wants to do a connected study building on. So they may like to look at so to build on your study, they may want to look at the other references you have referred as well. And of course, provided you've referred good journals, good articles from ranked journals, it gives credibility and provides strength to your arguments. That's why we typically say don't cite others' theses, avoid or minimize citing conference papers or journals which are not ranked, and try to build your sources mainly through ranked journals because that enhances credibility. And more importantly, a point of discussion in today's session, avoid plagiarism. So that's extremely important. So while you may be knowing what's plagiarism, I think reinforcing the importance is very critical because sometimes students do commit plagiarism without knowing. So plagiarism is unacknowledged use or appropriation of another person's words or ideas to support your argument. So you're using some other person's ideas or writings in your study without acknowledging. So obviously, as you know, it's an academic offense. Very important. Understand the gravity. It's an academic offense. And do remember, ignorance is not an excuse. So in today's context, ignorance will invariably not be there, because see, in today's session also we are talking. I'm sure throughout your degree programs in various courses, you have been told the importance of avoiding plagiarism, the consequences, the gravity, etc. So while in today's context, students are very much made aware of it, even if you didn't know it, you can't give that as an excuse. So if you do not cite a source intentionally or unintentionally, you are guilty of plagiarism. Therefore, we have to be very careful to make sure that we cite all our sources. So whenever you use another person's material or an idea, you have to cite sources. So very simply, by crediting your sources, you avoid plagiarism. And there's often this misconception. Some people say, well, if I give credit, maybe they will think that it's not my thing, I didn't do much. So they try to hide or avoid giving credit to others' work simply to showcase the importance of your study. But that's not really the case. As I have mentioned here, giving credit to others will not reduce the credit you get from your research. So instead, it will bring credibility. It will show that you are aware of the current body of knowledge. You are very conversant with the literature, and more importantly, you are being truthful and avoiding an academic offense. So be very serious. Make sure that you avoid plagiarism. I know what happens. Sometimes students forget to note down the source. They just write, and later then they can't recall from where you got it. Therefore, as the saying goes, um, read as you write, cite as you go. So that means as you read, if you find something important, interesting coming up, write about it. And as you write, note down the source as well. And save all your articles in different folders, subfolders as suited, so that you also can have the ability to go back to those articles when needed. And citing as you go will help you to uh, keep track of your citations and avoid plagiarism. And in today's context, you also need to be aware, while we always emphasize students to avoid plagiarism, universities and institutes, they have various plagiarism detection software as well. So you need to be cautious about that as well. Anyway, from integrity perspective, as good academic, good ethical, because in research ethics is so critical. One instance that you display good ethical practice in research is avoiding plagiarism. Therefore, don't take it lightly. It's extremely important that you cite your sources, give credit to others as necessary, and keep track of all the sources you have consulted, and cite them accurately and in a complete manner. So a bit more about citing. As I earlier said, keep a record of your readings as you collect. Adopt a system for storing reference information. So based on the particular articles, you might decide to have subfolders, methodology articles, literature articles, theory articles, whatever the case may be. You may want to have some subfolders, so that will make your life easier when you want to retrieve. Another important point is seek primary sources where possible. That is to say, minimize the use of secondary sources. So, of course, there are limits to this. What you need to remember is, if you read someone's article and that article has referred to many other sources, so if you find that particular argument posed by that reader is that writer is important, it's a good idea to go to those individual studies that have been referred to by that writer. Because if you just go by only the article you read, you may miss on the original interpretations of the original article. So one thing that we see, sometimes students read one article and say A and B 2020 as cited in C and D 2025. So you have read C and D 2025, and in many places you are saying A and B 2020, X and Y 2019, M and N 2015, everything as cited in A and B 2025. So that means you read one article and you are citing so many that particular article has cited. So that is where we say relying on secondary sources. So it's very important that you don't rely too much on other people's interpretations or secondary sources, because then the reader gets a message that you've just read one or two articles and are simply reproducing what those articles have said. So you need to try to find the primary sources, but of course there are sometimes limitations for us to access the original article. So then you need to try various methods. Maybe ask your lecturers, research supervisors, any of the colleagues, or see whether it's available on ResearchGate, whether you can request for the article from the author through ResearchGate, or sometimes for a limited time a particular article may be available on site. So you need to look at various options and try to get the original. Of course, the next point is obvious, but still for all we see problems. Sometimes students having in-text citation is there, reference entry is not there, or reference entry is there, in-text citation is not there. So it's extremely important you have in-text citation for all references, and all references to have in-text citation. So you need to make sure that completion and accuracy among references and citations, because if examiners detect some inconsistencies, again that can affect your overall evaluation. And the last point here, your reference list serves as a guide on your topic further. Take care to make it accurate and complete. Enable readers to locate your sources. So sometimes it can be quite difficult. We are not only dealing with authors in Sri Lanka where the surnames, etc., can be quite familiar. We always say research is global. So there will be a lot of readings that we are, citing from researchers across the world. So their spellings, all that can be, quite tricky for us. But you need to pay attention to detail and make sure you spell out the name accurately in your references and citations. And when it comes to the reference list, you need to make sure the volume, page, issue, the name of the journal, name of the article, everything is fully accurate and complete, following the particular reference style. If you have incomplete information in your references, a reader will be finding it difficult to locate your sources. So that's something you need to very much bear in mind. Always remember, while you are drawing on other people's reference list to get more articles, read off your article. If it's a published paper, they may try to get, or they may be able to source more articles, relevant articles through your reference. And as I said, your examiners, if they realize that you have been drawing on a particular study extensively, they may want to recheck the credibility, or maybe if they have not read that article, they may want to read it and understand it, etc. So all in all, the takeaway is you have to make sure that the references are accurate and complete. So, and also following the style. So when you say follow the style, as we will talk in a little while later, based on APA or Harvard or whatever the case may be? Is it italics? Is it a comma or a full stop, or is it within inverted commas or not? It may appear small, but still for all, when you take the overall quality of a document, of a thesis, these small things do make a big difference. Okay. Then a bit more about citing sources and compiling a reference list. So as you know, when you're citing, or we call it in-text citation. So as the name suggests, in-text means you're citing within the text. So within the particular paragraph, within the particular body of the study. Therefore, you always include the author name, that is author's surname, and the year. So how you include this would depend on the particular reference style that you have adopted. But nevertheless, it will be the author's surname and the year in the in-text citation. When it comes to references, as we earlier said, we present the references after all the chapters are written, completed. Then we have reference list, and the reference list is included before appendices started on a new page. So we start the list of references on a new page, and references are presented before the appendices, and they are organized in the alphabetical order of the first author's surname. So a person with, if there are, of course, one author, obviously, you go with that author's surname. If there are multiple authors, you look at the surname of the first author. So, surname of author starting with A will be at the top of the reference list. A surname of author starting with W, Y, etc. will be at the end. So, in a way, that also helps the reader to follow, because reader knows these references are organized in the alphabetical order. So, it should be in the first author's surname in a organized in the alphabetical order. Then the question arises, what to include under references. So what you include would largely depend on whether it's a journal article, whether it's a book, whether it's an edited book, whether it's a conference paper, etc., etc. So accordingly, you need to decide what information to use. And in the references and citations, P refers to a single page, whereas PP refers to a range of pages. Okay. So then we'll talk about the common citation style. So something you need to bear in mind is, based on the particular degree program and the particular journal to which you're submitting, you need to first look at the, in the case of the degree program, you need to check the program instructions, look at the handbook, look at the guidelines specified in terms of the particular referencing styles to be adopted based on the institutional requirement. If it's a case of a journal, you need to typically look at the author guidelines. So under author guidelines, they will give you the referencing style. So of course, there are variety of referencing styles. Commonly known is the APA style, or American Psychological Association style, then the Harvard style, Modern Language Association style, Chicago style. So these are only some examples. You need to understand what's the requirement of the particular degree program or the journal and follow it accurately and consistently. Also, do remember, citation styles evolve over time. So you need to also look at the very current versions. Now, for instance, the APA There have been several editions of the APA manual, but you need to go with the most recent one available. So you need to follow again as specified by the degree or the degree program or the journal. And depending on the style, there may be various punctuations that are being included for in-text citations and references. You can see the comma, the semicolons, ampersand versus spelling out A and D, italics, all that there can be quite differences that are being used for different in-text citations and references based on the different methods available. So you need to be aware what it is and then follow consistently. So I will take a little bit of time just to give you an overview of two commonly used citation styles and give you a possible resource that you could refer as well. So depending on the program, you need to check. In our faculty, we typically tell students to adopt the APA style, American Psychology Association. So at the moment, we have the 7th edition, 2019 edition, which is being available. So this is the web page of the APA. So if you go to the web page, it's a very comprehensive manual. It gives all the details and tutorials, and it's really user friendly and very informative. So so if your requirement is to follow APA, so this manual has wealth of resources that you could refer. So these two links, the first one is APA style grammar guidelines, second one is APA style grammar guidelines for citation. So first is for references, second one is for citations. So if you actually click on each of these, you will get the detailed guidelines in how you could formulate your reference list as well as how you include citations. So this is quite user friendly. It's a matter of you referring the particular websites and getting the details, because there's so much information, what to include, how to include based on the publication, etc. So at the moment we go with the 2019 version. So it offers guidelines for preparing research papers in social and behavioral sciences. Sorry. So then when it comes to citing under APA style, so if you are citing work with two authors, under parenthetical citations means within brackets, if there are two authors, you separate them by the ampersand. So that will be shown in this next slide as well. So you can see here APA style. So if it's parenthetical means it's within brackets. Parenthetical is always within brackets. Narrative means it's more descriptive, so it's only the year that you put in the bracket. But parenthetical, name of the author and year, both are within brackets. So obviously, if it's one author, then you put the entire thing, the author name and the year, both within the bracket in the parenthetical. And if it's two authors, you separate the two authors with the ampersand. So this is kind of a shortened form you use. So you separate with the ampersand. But in narrative, where you are having in more descriptive or more the kind of the author prominent form, there you write and as AND. So you can see ampersand versus AND. Is it clear? Parenthetical citation under APA we use ampersand, whereas in the narrative we spell out as AND. So if there are three or more authors in the parenthetical, so in the recent APA earlier APA, when there are 3 authors, we used to spell the 3 authors in the first instance. But in the new 2019 one, which is the most recent that we adopt, there, if it is 3 or more authors, from the first author onwards, you mention the first author and et al. Et al. Means and others. So there you see in the parenthetical, you put the entire first author, et al., full stop, comma, and the year, everything in bracket form. Whereas in the narrative citation, you put the first author, et al., there's no comma, full stop, and only the year within brackets. So that's the point I am trying to explain in this citation, in this particular slide as well. Same point we have explained here. Parenthetical, you use ampersand between the name of the authors when there are 2. Narrative, you always spell the word AND. That's for 2 authors. Then citing work based on the number of authors. So for work with 1 or 2 authors, include the author name in every citation. So if it is 1 author or 2 authors, so you spell all of their names. But if there are 3 or more, you only mention the first one's surname and et al. In every citation. So even in the first one, you don't spell out all the names. You say first author and et al. Then there may be instances where you go the information prominent method, where you want to cite multiple works when you want to kind of provide evidence for a particular point. So you are citing multiple work as evidence for a particular point. Then parenthetically, that means within brackets, you place the citation in alphabetical order, separating them with semicolons. So Adams et al. 2019, then Shumway and Schulman 2015, Westinghouse 2017. So you have to separate each of them through semicolons, and you typically use the alphabetical order. Okay. So, but having said that, you can refer to these, the best way to go forward is go to the website and you will see all the details when you click on it. So, I clicked on it. So, it says APA style, and then say it talks about referencing examples, paper formats, in-text citations, so all. If you click on it, you will be able to get all the details. See, all different sources, everything. It's a very comprehensive manual which carries all the details. Then in-text citations. So you will get details about there are details about plagiarism, then parenthetical versus narrative, how to cite multiple works, work with same author. So there is so much details, and also about paraphrasing, quotation. So it's very rich in terms of coverage. So based on your requirement, you can actually get a lot of details through referring this. So that's about the APA. So there is this comparison also, which I already explained about the parenthetical and narrative. So note the differences, ampersand versus A and D, and then et al, where you have a comma and where you don't have a comma. So these are subtle differences, but examiners will pick on them because they are familiar. They would be very conscious to see whether you have followed them very clearly as expected. So then there is another style, which is the Harvard style. So emerald journals typically follow the Harvard style, and there may be slight variations across different users. So I have made a note. This is based on Emerald's Harvard referencing style. So within the Harvard style, if you typically look at, because within the accounting and finance domain, there are a lot of key journals which are published by Emerald. So starting from, you can look at Accounting, Auditing and Accountability Journal, Qualitative Research in Accounting and Management, Journal of Accounting and Organizational Change, Journal of Applied Accounting Research, Qualitative Research in Financial Markets. So like that, there can be so many accounting and finance journals which are under the Emerald website, Emerald database. Then this is the style they typically use. So single author, obviously author name, comma and year. If it's two authors, now look at the difference. It's not ampersand, it is AND. So even within the parenthetical form, it is appearing as AND, not as ampersand. And three or more authors, again you use et al, but the difference here is et al is written in italics. So in the APA form, et al is written not in italic form. So these are some subtle differences. When you refer articles, you could presumably look at the Harvard style usage of the articles also and gain more familiarity. So this is a small comparison where a single journal article reference list you see under APA style. So Ediri Vikrama, comma, then after each name you have a full stop, and then after the year you are having a full stop under APA. Then the name of the article is mentioned. Then there is a full stop. Then the name of the journal is given in a, again, full stop, and then it is given in italic form. The volume, the issue is in non-italic form, and page number range is given. So in the Harvard style, the difference you see, it's not a full stop after the year, it's a comma. And there are inverted commas that are used to show the name of the article. And there is a comma being used. And again, rather than simply saying 9-1, volume, VOL, NO, PP, everything is spelled out under Harvard. So if it is multiple authors also, so you give the name of the authors. Again, you used ampersand to separate the authors. And where possible, if there is, you can give the DOI as well. So in the Harvard style, you are not using ampersand, you are spelling out in full the particular year, and you are spelling out the volume issue as well. So anyway, best way is to really look at the online sources, get yourself familiarized. So while you may realize that we spend a lot of time to talk about academic writing and also about plagiarism, but I'm just allocating few minutes to talk about tools for citation management. So that's with a reason. Because in today's era, there are a lot of resources. With the power of advances in technology, there are a lot of resources that you can use for citation management. So these are systematic. So you would realize that systematic way of storing information is vital to ensure the completeness and accuracy of references. So as I mentioned, given that some of the surnames will not be familiar to you, it will be very alien, and then if you may realize, if you miss a particular letter, the accuracy of the citation is also compromised. Therefore, maintaining the accuracy and the completeness of citation of references is so critical. So within this context, there are some ways that you can make your life easier. One is, you may be obviously aware, within the Microsoft Word also there is a facility that you could compile your references using APA, etc. within the Word document. Then also there are various reference management software like EndNotes, Mendeley, etc., which you can contact your library and maybe gain familiarity to those particular resources. But having said that, you do remember these are various reference management software. There can be issues sometimes with the particular software, and after all, things may not get picked up accurately. Therefore, if you use software, don't say I used EndNote, so it has to be accurate. If there is a problem, I don't know. I use Mendeley, I don't know. This is what it showed. Well, do remember, your thesis is your responsibility. Supervisors will help you. Various software will help you to make your life easy. There can be various things, but end of the day, it's your responsibility to make sure that it's accurate, complete, and has reached the desired quality level. Therefore, despite the fact you may use these various reference management software, you need to make sure to do a cross-check, see whether things have got picked up correctly. Are there any errors? So you need to do such a manual check or some cross-checking to ensure that things have been picked up correctly. So using software is no defense or no excuse to, cover up any issues in your referencing. Do understand? Because sometimes students do tell us the excuse, well, I use Mendeley, I used EndNote, so I don't know. So you can't say I don't know, because finally it's your research. Okay. So given that there's a lot of technological support, we are not obviously going deep into what they are. Instead, you can refer and get more inputs and see how those could be used to make your life easier, but it can't be a substitute to you being involved in the process. Okay. So those are the key elements I wanted to share today. So few points as takeaway I would like to reinforce based on the session that we did today. In terms of academic writing, we can't emphasize more about the need to write clearly and concisely. And also it's so critical to logically organize points with a good flow. Keep paragraphs short and focused. Use appropriate headings, subheadings, and ensure that what's written is relevant to the particular section or chapter. So sometimes just to make sure that the word limits are complied with, students tend to write things in a very disjoint manner, and that can be very difficult for an examiner to follow. And while linking words are important, do remember that they have to be used appropriately and avoid overusing them. So these points, of course, you will all agree, they are important, but really applying them in your research is easier said than done. Therefore, how you could really make sure that you are really applying these practices is through continuous improvement through the multiple drafts you do. So you need to remember your writing will need to get fine-tuned, improved based on supervisor feedback and your own reflections of the writing through several rounds. So you need to be prepared to write, reflect and rewrite. So the process, so never underestimate the time of rewriting to get your work into a tight, good academic writing format. Then in terms of um, um, referencing and citations, make sure that you write your sources honestly and accurately. Sometimes you may intentionally avoid certain sources because you feel putting those sources will be kind of affecting the credibility of your research or the value of your research. You feel, okay, someone has done a similar study. If I cite it, my value of my study is less. That's not the case. If it has been already published in a credible source, you need to be honest and acknowledge it, and also be accurate in your citations and references, and ensure that you don't commit the offense of plagiarism. Familiarize yourself with the program guidelines. Revisit, reread your course handbooks, any other guidelines, and understand your expectations and follow them consistently. Be cautious about formatting, consistent formatting, accurate grammar, accurate spellings, punctuation, all that convey a particular signal to the examiner. They convey positive signals, and that may make a difference between the grade you get. I wouldn't say that you're going to come down on it because of it, but certainly sometimes you may be awarded some extra points, extra marks for the simple reason that it is very easy friendly to read. It's very professional in terms of the layout, formatting, and the examiner understands that you paid attention to details. So as the saying goes, each comma, capital, simple letter matters. Because through research, we are trying to give a particular training to the students, so that also it's not only about the final output, but also the uh, kind of the discipline to pay attention to detail and do a quality piece of work. So those are the wider skills that examiner would also see to what extent you have been trained on through the entire research process. And as you would see, I have avoided plagiarism. So even though it is our joint work uh, with my two friends, Tharusha and Madhuka, still I have acknowledged the source because even self-plagiarism is an offense. Do remember, even if it's your own work, you need to cite the sources. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about today. We have few minutes to take questions. If not, we have about 12-13 minutes. One thing is we can take some questions, or at the initial part, I didn't show much examples about paraphrasing, in-text citations, etc. Those I can take a bit more time to explain that, but that you could even figure out on your own. But if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. Any questions now? Is there questions, or I can take this time to run through the particular examples which I didn't quite, which you do right now, and just told you to leisurely refer from articles. Anything? Hope you were able to get something out of the session. Shall I take you through those examples if you don't have questions? One is, can I just show a few examples of linking words then? Okay. So we could go up and then see the nature of linking words that have been used in this article. Can you see any linking words? Doing so. So that's also linking word where you are trying to connect to the earlier point. So this is again about a sequence as a prologue to the story which illuminates the issues that emerge from the empirical side. Section 2 outlines our theoretical framework. Then in section 3, the methodology used in the study is presented. Section 4 presents the findings. Section 5 offers a discussion of the findings. The paper ends with a conclusion and some implications for research and practice in section 6. Then since we were also talking about author prominent and information prominent, now say it's giving an explanation and say, for example, and giving so many citations. So this is more information prominent. So you're giving a particular point and directing the reader towards many other work. Next one is also, this is also information prominent, where you give a key feature of the actor network theory and directing the reader towards some writing. Then within that information prominent write-up, you are specifically trying to highlight what Lee and Hazard 1999 said. Therefore, here it starts with saying Lee and Hazard indicates, and that is a author prominent citation. And again, this is information prominent. And so you might see there is more information prominent than author prominent that is being applied. So here also you see all information prominent, but this one is author prominent. While Byers and Chua 2001 drew on A&T in their ABC study, so that is author prominent. And then again you are bringing another author. Alukov et al. 2008 explored the diffusion of two management accounting innovations. Moreover, Emsley 2008 in his longitudinal case study. So you can see there you are trying to bring the perspective of the different authors. That's why it is more author prominent. So each of the authors are given emphasis in all that. So here also you have a series of author prominent write-up. So when you want to illustrate the particular perspective taken by a particular author, you take the author prominent. Then here again you have more information prominent. So as I earlier said, there is no hard and fast rule. Typically it should be a kind of a combination of author and information prominence. So we'll see, are there any other linking words try to identify some linking words. So again, how the research site was justified. Firstly, secondly, thirdly. So that's also more sequence. Again, data collection, that's also sequence. Firstly, secondly, thirdly. See, furthermore. So that is to kind of say something in addition kind of idea, furthermore. So there's another furthermore. Hence. So it's like to say hence, therefore, giving reasons. So maybe we'll stop that and then look at the other article to understand some examples where various citations and author prominent, information prominent, as well as direct any other quotes have been used. Oh, sorry, where's the article? So we could take few minutes and then see what kind of citations have been used. So you can see there's a lot of information provisioned. So all this is for a review C. So they are all information prominent. This is also information prominent. So you can see so many citations. So it's also to do with the writing style of author. So there's a lot of information prominent in this writing. So again, this is also information prominent. Study extends the current understanding in WFC in several ways. First, so it is giving, when you say several ways, now the reader is looking for what is first, then what is second. So can you see? So the different ways are being mentioned. So again, this is also information prominent. So a lot of information prominent writing given. Any other transition words? However is there. You see however, another however here. Furthermore is there. So you can see, so you can, these are just two examples. You can refer more articles in your particular domains and understand how these different points have been illustrated. So finally, I would like to reinforce by reminding you about these particular activity points. First is, find some articles you are closely familiar with in rank journals. Look at the use of linking words. Then look how tables, figures and appendices have been used for what and how they have facilitated better presentation of ideas in the study. Then see how direct quoting, paraphrasing as well as author prominent and information prominent citations have been used. So those are the key things I think we have been able to cover. Hope you got some inputs through the session. And thank you once again to Professor Jayanta Devasiri for the opportunity, and wishing all the participants good luck with your research and also making good publications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. It was a very informative and insightful session. So the participants cannot use their mic in this platform, so they can use only Q&A session. That means Q&A chat. So, and I hope it seems like we don't have questions.
Yes.
So we'll move to the rest of the formalities, Madam.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Madam, can you unshare your slideshow?
Yes, we'll do. Okay.
So thank you, Chair Professor Tharusha. So good evening to distinguished guests and the esteemed audience. It's indeed a privilege and a great honor for me to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka, as we successfully conclude the 11th session of the Thesis Mastery Program 2025. So let me begin by extending my heartfelt appreciation to Chair Professor Tharusha Gooneratne, Chair Professor of Accounting from the Department of Accounting, Faculty of Management and Finance, University of Colombo, for leading today's session. Madam, it was indeed a truly insightful and enlightening session. At the outset, a special note of gratitude goes to the Faculty of Management Studies under the leadership of Professor Atula Nyanapala for continuously supporting this initiative. I am also immensely thankful to Professor T.Y. Pires, Head of the Department of Accountancy and Finance, whose unwavering commitment has been instrumental in driving this program forward. My deep appreciation also goes to Professor Jayanta Devasiri, the main coordinator of the Thesis Mastery Program, for his continued encouragement and unconditional support. Next, my sincere thanks also go to the organizing committee, particularly to Ms. Shanika Ratnasiri, Ms. Madhusha Amarasena, Ms. Lakmini Valapumbura, Mr. Sajid Karunaratne, and Mr. Dakshina Patabandi, for their seamless coordination and dedicated efforts in ensuring the smooth execution of each session. Last but certainly not least, my heartfelt thanks go to all academics, researchers, and research students who joined us today. Your presence and active engagement are what truly make these sessions meaningful. Before conclude, I warmly invite all of you to join us for the upcoming 12th session of the Thesis Mastery Program titled The Right Tool for the Right Insight using the Based Analysis Method in Quantitative Research, which will be conducted by Professor D.G. Dharmaratne from the Department of Accountancy and Finance, Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa, University of Sri Lanka. Once again, thank you all for being a part of this evening. Wishing you a pleasant and restful evening ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you.